It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Reynardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces deep. And then, this Emperor's horrific sacrifices had brought it back to the surface. Reynardo wasn't exactly sure how to use the legendary weapon. But surely, there must be some way to do it without provoking another catastrophe. Had he, somehow, summoned the long-lost components of the legendary weapon out of the deep places of the Earth? It was more than Reynardo could fathom. But if he could find a legendary weapon, he would use it. As he set foot on the island, Reynardo couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lupino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Reynardo felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Reynardo never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? Ha! Bet you never saw that coming. The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the lost gods, thousands of thousands had died. But Reynardo had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one. There was a radiance at the end of a long, dark tunnel. Mother, he thought. Skyripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway. The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Skyripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. Reynardo asked himself why he changed course to confront Zenobia. He'd no idea. Sometimes he would just do things, and he could never figure out why he'd done them. Usually, they worked out. After all, he was a hero. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfu School. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because, know your enemy. All right, maybe he should stop pretending. He knew exactly how she felt about him. But their love affair always ended with a tragic death. Unless, maybe he could find a way to dodge tragedy. Surely he could, couldn't he? He couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? The market. It was going to be full of gogglers, wasn't it? Oh, it would have been so much more fun before the war. When the worst thing that could happen to you was getting fleeced buying a rug. Reynardo wasn't entirely sure how he was going to capture Zenobia. She'd be expecting him. And he didn't have Lapino to cook up a clever plan. Why was it again that he hadn't got the core? Maybe because the results tended to be disastrous. These streets were familiar. The Swordfu School was closed now, but he had been down that street 1,000 times. He knew that pub. He knew that alley. He knew the alley behind it much too well. No wonder Zenobia had chosen to invade this island herself. Reynardo slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally, he reached her bedroom. She was curled up on her bed. Oh, he'd forgotten how beautiful she was. How sleek, how soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She vanished. And he suddenly noticed he couldn't move except his mouth. In fact, soon he couldn't keep his mouth shut. He told Zenobia everything. Skyripper, the Iblistone, even where the secret rebel base was, until he was hoarse. It was some kind of truth spell. A talky truth spell. She called her father by far-speaker Toad and filled His Majesty in.
But why didn't he get the core?
Croaked the far-speaker in something like His Majesty's croak. Because I missed you, darling. Reynardo grinned.
He doesn't even know why.
Frowned Zenobia.
That makes no sense. It's a trap,
Shouted the Emperor.
I'll meet you at the outpost, and I'll bring my interrogators.
If Reynardo came face to face with the Emperor, maybe he could assassinate him. But maybe it would be smarter and safer to turn Zenobia against her father. You're lying, she said. Somehow you're lying. The spell hadn't worn off yet. He had to tell the truth. The trick was in making sure she wouldn't believe it. The core is perfectly safe, he said. And he tried his hardest to sound sincere. So is the Iblistone. In fact, I was trying to get them myself. Fine then, interrogators it is, she said angrily. I gave you a chance. The Emperor's interrogators were not especially gentle, even by weasel standards. Fortunately, Zenobia had locked him in the guest quarters on her ship, and she'd forgotten it had a toilet that, like all skyship toilets, could be vented into the abyss. This was not the sort of slippery fox he wanted to be. But just as they were about to land, he threw the latch, wrinkled his nose, and leapt through the open latrine. It was a short, safe landing. At least this part of the Nexus hadn't changed too much. Zenobia had been taking him to the Imperial outpost. She'd never expect him to go there by himself. Well, maybe she would. I never knew with her. Hey, with the new aerobics trays. Am I right? Reynardo knew Zenobia, and Zenobia knew him. She'd suspected a trick. Now he'd vanished. She would probably guess that was his plan all along. Perfect. Maybe she wouldn't use the Sky Ripper. At least not without taking it to the scientists at the observatory first. Meanwhile, the Emperor would be coming to the outpost personally. This could be good. It wasn't his fault. They looked so breakable. Reynardo was face to face with the Emperor's bodyguard. They looked very tough, but the Emperor held them back.
Oh, where's my daughter?
And how would I know that? Reynardo grinned at him.
She lured me here so that you could kill me, didn't she?
Ah, don't be ridiculous, said Reynardo, trying his best to sound convincing. She loves you.
Oh, I knew it. The rabbit told me I couldn't trust her.
The Emperor hopped out the door. His phalanx of bodyguards retreated carefully. Reynardo heard someone call, "Arrest her!" as they left. Well, that's a job well done, thought Reynardo. Now the fleet will be in all sorts of disarray. But maybe he could find her in the mountains. She always used to go to the mountains to hide from the world. Maybe he could even turn her against her father.
Or maybe he could reap the benefits of the chaos he had sown. It was time to report to the Rebel Council, and then launch the attack on a divided and very confused Imperial fleet.
Reynardo was very proud of himself. He'd told the Empire everything, but now they didn't believe anything, and it looked like the Emperor didn't trust his daughter anymore either. There were some advantages to having a slippery reputation, weren't there? Reynardo wondered if he'd really fooled the Empire. He guessed he'd know soon enough. If the skies darkened with 1,000 dropships, then he'd know the Empire believed his map of the Rebel base's secret location. They certainly seemed to be looking for it. There were ravens everywhere. But where were there ravens these days? Reynardo wondered how much Hypatia had known about the book she protected. Enough to tell her son to protect it. Enough to tell Reynardo to protect her son. He'd let her down there. Maybe the Emperor would attack Zenobia. The Ravens, divided into two armies, would slaughter each other, and the rebellion could just show up and claim victory. Actually be overjoyed that Reynardo had given away all their secrets. See? It was actually very fine weather, except for the occasional shower of ravens. And no one was burning the ruins down with the mighty power of a god's eye. If the Empire believed anything he'd said, they certainly weren't showing it. Hey, why don't you guys fight in groups? Oh, I know. Because there's no I in team. The long stairs. So he was close to the Rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. As he told his hilarious adventures to the Rebel Council, he began to realize they weren't laughing. Just staring at him with those big bug eyes.
Zenobia let you escape?
Asked the speaker.
How do we know you're not a double agent?
Then I wouldn't tell you about her at all.
Maybe you're trying to sound like an idiot, so we don't realize how clever you are.
Croaked the speaker. No, I promise you, I really am that much of an idiot. Reynardo was about to say when a half-dozen Imperial ships began to bomb the base.
He's betrayed us!
Croaked the toads, and Reynardo decided it would be good to be somewhere else. He boarded the Farfarer and got out of there. The wind ruffled Reynardo's fur the wrong way. So the rebels thought he was lying too? Because a half-dozen lousy dropships had probably just tripped over the rebel base? Okay, technically he had betrayed its location, but not willingly. And he'd made up for it, hadn't he? Then something exploded. A cannon shot. The Farfarer plunged out of the clouds. The rebels had hit his ship. As the Farfarer plummeted towards the abyss, he launched himself into the sails of an Imperial ship.
Farfarer was gone, it'd have been a beautiful ship. And fast. It could do the Kestrel run in 12 furlongs. Or so the salesman had told him.
He would show them. He would be the hero of the final battle. They'd know whose side he was on then. That's what it meant to be a hero. To go on fighting, even when both sides were trying to kill you.
Right into the middle of the fleet. It was a glaring weakness in the defense. Wondered if he could learn to cook this way.
Probably not. See? Rebels were fighting ravens everywhere, and not a single weapon in sight. No one was summoning giant murder bears out of the clouds. There were no locusts, no rain of fire. Something blew up nearby, and Reynardo decided it was not time to stop and ponder. Just as well, he liked acting much better than pondering.
This was definitely better than pulling yourself up in a bucket.
Finally, Reynardo reached the Emperor's ship, and there he saw a strange sight. Zenobia being led in shackles by Lapino with a squad of ravens. What? Lapino was working with the ravens? Was he some sort of traitor? Of course Lapino was working with the ravens. But the Emperor still thought Zenobia was a traitor? Reynardo felt oddly bad about that. Should he run down there and rescue her? Oh, but she was the enemy. Then he heard a whistling sound. He looked straight up and saw a rebel ship